Oh, Misty, you are always welcome on this channel. We're going to be starting this Misty theme deck with a tadpole, a little Poliwag. And Poliwag is going to be your ideal starting Pokemon, as that's going to be the fastest setup in getting all of your water energy onto the board and hitting for big damage. Poliwag has a couple of low energy attacks that you're going to be able to utilize very early on. Of course, the goal is going to be evolving up into Poliwhirl, who has its own form of stalling, basically. Twiddle. For one colorless energy, you are able to either put your opponent to sleep or confuse them. And you don't necessarily need to be attaching a ton of energy as quickly as possible onto Poliwhirl, because you're going to evolve up into Politoed, which has its own version of Rain Dance for one colorless energy, sudden growth. Attach any number of basic energy cards from your hand onto Politoed. So you can go from 1 to 6 energy all of the same turn onto this Politoed if you really want to. The obvious goal is to use Energy Splash to deal 70 damage pretty early game, which is already rough to deal with in the theme deck format, but it's also moving 2 of those water energy onto your benched Pokemon, which are going to be Starmie and Quagsire. 2 stage 1 Pokemon that have the water gun attack that's going to deal extra damage for the extra number of water energy attached to Starmie. So for 3 energy, water gun is going to be dealing 50 damage off of this Starmie, and it's pretty easy to accomplish if you get the right setup with Politoed, because you're just attaching energy to Politoed and then water splashing those energy onto your benched Pokemon, so you get to maneuver around the 1 energy per turn rule to load up your Starmies and your Quagsires to deal massive damage much earlier than you would normally be able to. Now, Quagsire's water gun is a little more underpowered. Its base damage is 20 instead of 10, but you're only dealing an additional 10 per water energy. So for Quagsire, you're only going to be able to max out at 40, but you also have that alternative Slam attack that can deal some massive damage if you just want to keep loading energy onto the Quagsire and use that alternative attack. The reason I have both Starmie and Quagsire in here is because they're doing similar things, just in slightly different ways. But Quagsire has a weakness to grass, Starmie has a weakness to lightning, so you get a little more coverage in your backup attackers. This deck functions very much the same way as that Erica deck that we already covered, where you are just cheating energy into play early game, spreading those around to your different Pokemon, and just pulling off big attacks that you shouldn't be able to get off that early, especially in a theme deck format. This deck just ramps that up a little bit just with the sheer number of water energy you're able to drop at the same time using that Politoed. The trick is really just getting those energy into your hand so you can drop them, and in order to do that, we're going to be thinning the deck a little bit with Pokemon Fan Club, searching out your Poliwags, Staryus, and Woopers very early on. The draw power is going to be coming from Bill mostly, just straight up draw. Hopefully you can Bill into Bill. That way you're just drawing a ton of cards, filling your hand with water energy. Copycat's also going to assist with drawing and refreshing your hand to match your opponents whenever they're drawing up big time. And then Master Ball is going to be an additional search resource to get those evolution cards off the top of your deck. Sometimes this strategy gets delayed, or you just have to revamp it late game, which is why there's 2 copies of Fisherman in here. That way, if you just need a bunch of energy in your hand, and that's all you need to get another Politoed kick started, Fisherman's going to be your go-to. And once you use sudden growth and dump all those water energy onto a Politoed, you have to make sure that that Politoed is going to live till the next turn so you can actually use its follow-up attack and splash those energy around to your Pokemon. In order to do that, Goldberry is going to be extremely helpful. Politoed has 110 HP, so with the help of Goldberry, you are pretty assured that you're going to be able to make it next turn unless you're already sitting on a bunch of damage counters, in which case I don't know why you use sudden growth anyway. A full playset of boost energy is also going to allow you to use Energy Splash stupidly fast early in the game if you really want to, if you really just want to get a key knockout very early game. But also late game, if you can just hold on to a boost energy, that way your opponent's going, okay, they're going to have to use 2 full turns to set up this attack. They're going to have to sudden growth, pass to my turn, pass back to them, and then use Energy Splash. Well, you can surprise them and completely disrupt their gameplay loop by going, no, I'm just going to straight up use Energy Splash right now because I've got boost energy. Starmie and Quagsire both have 3 and 4 energy, completely colorless attacks that you can drop a boost energy on and just fire off. Quagsire only has a 1 water energy on it and you need to deal more than 20 damage. Well, drop a boost energy and potentially deal 100. This late in the Gym Leader game, this far into your Johto Kanto post-game story, we need to ramp up the level of difficulty, the power scaling a little bit, and I think that's what this deck does best. Is it goes, yep, these Pokemon aren't a huge threat, unless they really get going, and then they're going to be unstoppable. What are you going to do with this much energy on the board? For alt Pokemon, let's start with Misty's Ace Starmie. They are both Psychic type, and so I dismissed them at first just because they weren't on theme, but the more I was looking at Misty's alternative Pokemon, I realized that you could just run a mostly Psychic Misty deck. Because these two Starmie cards are not bad, and they can utilize water energy. They pair pretty well with the Golducks available, since all the Golducks in this era of the TCG were just water-type psychic attackers anyway. And a mixed energy deck actually pairs pretty well with the Aquapolis Togetic. And Mini Metronome could be a devastating one energy attack to flip the tables on your opponent. It's just too bad that it requires a coin flip or else it would be broken. So if you're just looking to have some fun, Psychic Misty could be its own alternative theme deck. But if you're wanting to stick to the pure water theme, then there are some other good alternative Pokemon. Genesis Quagsire is a pretty decent water type haymaker, dealing 30 damage for 2 energy, but that's pretty much all you're going to be using it for. Revelation Quagsire is the exact opposite in card build, so you wouldn't be able to use its haymaker attack at all. Instead, you would be only accessing its Whirlpool attack, which is pretty decent for 4 energy, but not great. The Skyridge Lapras is an amazing support Pokemon, especially for water decks, but it wasn't nearly aggressive enough for what I was wanting to do with this deck, and so it did not make the cut. Discovery Politoed is also a pretty solid card, but it really only works well in its own dedicated archetype. Wouldn't you know it, I already have a video on the channel about the Frog Song archetype, so go watch it. And that is going to be all for the Misty deck. This is another one of my favorites that I made just because it's so straightforward, easy to use, and non-complicated. You really just dump a bunch of water energy, move it around, deal big damage. Misty's quote from the games is, "I am an all-out offensive water type something or other," and that is what this deck does, so I'm happy with it. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Let me know what your favorite theme decks have been so far and what theme decks you would like to see in the future. I very much appreciate you watching all the way to the end. If you're new to the channel, go check out the treasure trove of vintage Pokemon TCG content I have stored, and have a great day. Social media links are in the description. I'll see you next video.